For this video, we will be talking about section 10.6 and 10.7, which is factoring quadratic trinomials, and this will actually be broken up over 2 days. So there will be 2 separate videos. In these videos, you will learn 2 additional ways to factor. So just to recap really quick, we so far have factored out the GCF. That's one way that we've learned to factor. We've also learned to factor by grouping. Now, something that I want to take note of really quick, factoring out the GCF can have as many terms, there's no limit, or there's no cutoff. For grouping, though, we can only factor polynomials in this class when we have 4 terms, because again, you have to group it into the first 2 and the last 2. So you'll notice today we are factoring trinomials. Therefore, grouping will not work for this. So basically we will have 2 different methods depending on what a is. So if a is 1, meaning this coefficient right here in front of x squared, if a is 1, we're going to factor with what we call simple factoring. Now I know that that's misleading. It's supposed to imply that it's easy. It may not be. So don't take simple factoring as it should be simple, right? You'll just see in day 2's video that it gets a lot more complex. So we called this something, we're going to call it simple factoring because the steps are much more simple than day 2 steps. So if a is 1, basically that would be 1x squared or just x squared plus bx plus c. So when we have no coefficient for a, it's technically 1, we're going to use this method right here that has these steps. So step 1 says, and I'll leave it on the screen, step 1 says factor out the GCF if necessary. So looking at 1, I don't see a GCF. Then it says to draw 2 sets of parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then it says to split the first term. Well, in order to split x squared, that would be x and x. Then it says to put our signs in place. If the second sign is positive, and this is just something that you're going to have to memorize, if the second sign is positive, the signs are the same. So second sign right here is positive. This tells me that they are the same. Now, if they're the same, we have to refer to the first sign to determine whether they are positive or negative. In this case, since this is a plus sign, that tells me that they are both going to be positive. So then I like to put in my table over here 2 plus signs because I know that they both need to be positive. Now, you need to find factors of the last term. So factors of C, factors of 15 would be 1 and 15, 3 and 5, and that should be it. Next, you need to find the sum of the factors. So if I add 1 and 15, that gives me 16. They need to add up to be the middle term. So right here, they need to add or subtract to be the middle term. It depends on the sign. So 16 is not the middle term because I need it to be an 8 here. So 3 and 5 makes 8. These are the numbers that I need to plug in. So then I have my signs plus and plus. Actually, I'm going to go back to my green there. We should have done that from the get-go. And then my factors that I'm going to use are x plus 3 and x plus 5. This would be my final answer. Now, if you think about it, we basically just thought through this backwards of FOILing, because eventually you'd have to multiply 3x and 5x together. If you add those together, that would give you 8. But then they have to multiply to be 15, because when you multiply the L of FOIL last would be 3 times 5, which would give you 15. So we're basically just going backwards. Again, remember, to factor means to break it down. So going through those steps from start to finish again on number 2, factor out the GCF if necessary. I don't see a GCF. Draw 2 sets of parentheses. Split the middle term. Split the first term. Put the signs in place. So again, second sign is positive. This tells me that they are the same. First sign tells me that they are both plus signs. So I'm going to put plus, and then I like to also put it over here on top of my table. And you'll see why later the signs make a difference when I put them over here on my table. Now, I need factors of 24 that add to 11. So factors of C, or factors of 24, would be 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Now, if I start adding them together, 1 and 24 makes 25, 2 and 12 makes 14, 3 and 8 makes 11. So boom, there's the ones I need right there. So then I'm going to plug in a 3 here and an 8 here. So x plus 3 and x plus 8 would be my final answer for my parentheses there. Okay, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more here now that I don't have the list of steps up there. So GCF, not on number 3. So then I draw 2 sets of parentheses. split the first term, plug in my signs. This tells me that they are the same. Now, this tells me that they are both negative, so x minus something and x minus something. Now, if you think about it, right, whatever number goes after the two negative signs, two negatives make a positive when you multiply them together. So that's kind of how that thought process works as well. Next, I need factors of 24 that add up to negative 11, but they both need to be negative. So I have negative 1 and negative 24. I have negative 2 and negative 12. Negative 3 and negative 8, negative 4 and negative 6. If I start adding these together, I would get a negative 25, a negative 14, a negative 11. Whoop, that's the one I want because that's my middle term that it needs to add up to. So then x minus 3 and x minus 8 would be our final answer on this one. And again, you can always check yourself by foiling it back out. Looking at number 4, no GCF. Draw my parentheses, split my first term. Second sign is positive. This tells me that they're going to be the same sign. First sign is negative, tells me that they are both going to be negative. So x minus something and x minus something. I need factors of 8 that add up to 6. And actually it needs to be a negative 6 with both of them being negative. So negative 1, negative 8, negative 2, and negative 4. This gives me negative 9 when I add them together, and this gives me a negative 6. So I need to use negative 2 and negative 4, again, because I need it to add up to be the middle term. So x minus 2 and x minus 4 go inside of my parentheses there. On number 5, no GCF again. So then we have second sign is, whoa. I got way ahead of myself. Okay, no GCF. Draw my parentheses, split the first term. Now we can do the signs. Now, the second sign in this case is a negative sign. So then this tells me that the two signs have to be different because if you think about it, when you FOIL this back out, you need it to be a positive times a negative to get a negative. So I have one positive and one negative. So then I like to put one negative and one positive up above, and I need factors of 36 that add up to 9. So I have negative 1 and positive 36, negative 2 and positive 18, negative 3 and 12, negative 4 and 9, and then negative 6 and 6. Now, if I start adding them up, this gives me 35. Be careful because the first number is negative. 18 and negative 2 makes 16. 12 and negative 3 makes 9. So boom, right there, that's what I need. Now, something else to take note of, it doesn't matter which, well, it does matter, but when you make your table of factors, it doesn't matter which one you start out making negative, but you've got to make one of those numbers negative. Now, in this case, I needed it to be a positive 9. So in this case, if 12 is positive, it's the bigger number that's going to give me a positive 9. Now, when you plug these into your parentheses, you've got to be careful. The plus sign has to have the 12 because that's what needs to be positive. The minus sign needs to be with the 3 because that's the one that needs to be negative. Again, if you FOILed this back out, you would get, outside would give you x times negative 3, which would be negative 3x. Inside, 12 times x is 12x, so negative 3x and 12x makes 9x. But then when you multiply 12 and negative 3, you get that negative 36 there. So that would be your answer on number 5. Looking at number 6, draw my parentheses. There's no GCF. Split my first term. Second sign is negative, so this tells me it's different. And again, when it's different, I don't really care about what the first sign is because I know that I have to have one negative and one positive. So a negative and a positive. Factors of 21 would be negative 1 and 21, negative 3 and 7. So if I add these up, I would get 20 and 4. Now, the problem is I need it to be a negative 4. But right now I have a positive 4. So all I have to do is take the negative away from the 3 and put it with the 7. I still have different signs, but now my answer would be negative 4 when I add them together. So then I need to put x plus 3 and x minus 7 in my parentheses. So you have to be careful when it's different. You have to pay attention to which one actually needs the negative and which one needs the positive. So that's it for the front. Let's go ahead and flip over to the back side. So now on the back side, you'll notice that it is the exact same problems here. However, we don't have tables anymore. So now we're going to start using our X games that we've been doing in our bell work and see how that also can be incorporated instead of doing the tables. So looking at number 7, again, always look for a GCF first. So on 7, I don't see one. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my 2 sets of parentheses. And then we're going to split the first term. So x squared would be split up into x and x. And then we're going to place our signs. So again, second sign tells me that they're going to be the same. First sign tells me they're both going to be positive. So put my plus and plus. And then I'm going to go over here off to the side and I'm going to draw my x. Now, the rule of thumb that you have to understand, I'm going to draw another one up here before we dive too far into this. You're looking for factors of c. So remember, they have to multiply to be c, but add to be b. So when you place your numbers, c would go in the top, so they have to multiply to be 10 and add to be 7. So then you can think in your brain about what those two numbers would be, and then you should come up with 2 and 5. So then your answer here would be x plus 2 and x plus 5. Looking at number 8, this one is slightly different than the ones that we've seen so far. This one actually does have a GCF at the very beginning to factor out. So we're going to factor out a 2 from everything. It is the only thing that they share in common. So I have a 2 out in front. Then we have x squared plus 3x minus 4. So then when you go to factor this, make sure you're only focusing on the inside. The 2 is no longer relevant. It will still absolutely be part of our final answer, but we will not use it in the X games when we do that. So I'm going to bring down the 2, and then I have our 2 parentheses, just like we've been doing, split x squared up into x and x. This tells me that the signs are going to be different. And then again, remember, the first sign only tells you that when they add up together, the 2 factors that you choose, they have to end up being a positive 3. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my x here, and I'm going to put negative 4 here. So make sure the most important thing is when you do this that you're looking at what's inside of the parentheses, not the original problem anymore. So I need 2 factors that multiply to be negative 4, but add to be positive 3. So I'll give you a second to think about it if you can come up with it. And we should be using factors 1 and negative 4. Whoa, 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 just kidding. Let me get my eraser. I put my negative with the wrong one. It should be a negative 1 and a positive 4 to get us that positive 3 when you add them together. So then we'll have x minus 1 and x plus 4. Okay, looking at 9, same idea again. So this one does not have a GCF, so we're going to go ahead and draw our 2 parentheses, split the first term up into x and x. Second sign tells me that they're going to be the same. First sign tells me that they're both going to be negative. So then if I draw my x here, we have factors that multiply to be 18, but add to be negative 11. Those 2 factors would be negative 2 and negative 9. So then that's what goes in your 2 parentheses, x minus 2 and x minus 9. Number 10, no GCF again, so draw our parentheses, split x squared up into x and x. And then we need the same sign, and they're both going to be plus. So plus and plus. And then if we draw our x, factors that multiply to be 16, but add to be 8. And those 2 factors would be 4 and 4. So then we have x plus 4 and x plus 4. So I would accept this answer written like this, but if you also notice, these both end up being the exact same parentheses. So I would also be absolutely okay if you made your answer x plus 4 squared, because both factors were plus 4. So either of those answers would be totally fine. If we look at 11, no GCF again, so parentheses, split x squared up into x and x. Second sign tells me that they're going to be the same. First sign tells me in this case that they're both going to be negative or minus. So then we draw our x here, and we have factors of 64 that add up to be negative 16. I'll give you a moment to think about that. And it would end up being negative 8 and negative 8. So then we have x minus 8 and x minus 8. Again, just like number 10, these two end up being the exact same parentheses. So I would also accept x minus 8 squared on the outside, since there are 2 of the exact same parentheses. Now, if you look at number 12, 12 looks a little bit different. This is a binomial, whereas we said that we were going to be factoring trinomials for this entire notes page. So something that you need to understand, this is really x squared plus 0x. B is missing. We know A and C, but we don't know B. Well, we do know B. It's just that it's 0. So when you go to factor this, you have to consider that that middle term canceled out. It is no longer there. So when we go to do our parentheses, everything is still the same. The rules all still apply. This is your second sign, so that tells us that the signs have to be different. And then we just know that it needs to add up to be 0 in the middle. So if I go down here and I draw my x and I have negative 36 on the top, they have to add to be 0. You know that your signs are supposed to be different, so one has to be positive and one has to be negative. Oh, and we skipped a few steps here, so we need x and x. And we know that they're different, so one's positive and one's negative. And then if we go back to filling out our x games here, we know that in order for it to be 36, that could be 6 and 6, but the signs are supposed to be different. So if I make one of them negative, negative 6 plus 6 would add up to 0. So then we would have x plus 6 and x minus 6. Now, the question I always get is, can I also write this as x? I'm not really sure what you would put, but basically, are you allowed to make it look like this answer right here with the squared on the outside? And the answer is no, because they are not the exact same parentheses. So on 12, this is the only way that you could write your final answer. So then looking at 13 here, again, we're missing that b term. So really we're looking at y squared plus 0y minus 49. So then when we go to factor this, we're going to draw our two parentheses, split up y. And then second sign tells us that they're going to be different. So we know that one has to be plus and one has to be minus. So then if we draw our x here, we have negative 49 for our c. They have to multiply to be negative 49, but add to be 0. That would be 7 and negative 7. So then our answer would be y plus 7 and y minus 7 would be your final answer. Now, 14 and 15, they end up being relatively similar to what we were just talking about. However, there is a y squared and a y, as well as an x squared and an x. So we have two variables we have to make sure that we consider. So we're going to go about this the same way that we have been. So we're going to split our two parentheses here, split x squared up into x and x, and we're going to just ignore the y's for just a moment. We're just going to get our numbers in place, our signs in place. This tells us that it's going to be different. So we have x plus something and x minus something. And then when we go to draw our x, again, it's factors of negative 55. So multiply to be negative 55 and add to be positive 6. We're looking at using negative 5 and positive 11. So then we're going to go ahead and fill those in. Now, I did put the plus first, so that's going to be my plus 11. And then I put the minus second, so that's going to be my minus 5. Now, the question is, on the last term right here, because remember, you can check your answers by foiling your two binomials back out to see what you get. If you only have 11 times negative 5, that would only give you negative 55. You have to remember, how do you get y squared? By multiplying two things together. If this was an 11y and this was a negative 5y, if you multiplied those back together, that would get you that y squared. Now, on the other side of that, we have this term right here, the 6xy. If you multiplied x by negative 5y, you'd get negative, just write it over here, negative 5xy. And then if you multiplied 11y by x, you would get plus 11xy. And if you combine those together, you would get 6xy, just like you do in the original problem. So all we have to do differently on 14 is add that y to the last term in each binomial. That ends up being your final answer. So then we have the exact same idea on 15. So again, draw our parentheses here, split up x squared. Signs are going to be different. So then I'm going to put plus and minus. And then if we draw our x here, we have factors of negative 27 that add up to be positive 6. That would be a negative 3 and a positive 9. So then if I fill my numbers in correctly, the plus would be the 9, the minus would be the 3. And then again, in order to get that y squared at the end, both of these would have to have a y with them for your final answer. Now, the rest of the notes, oh, actually, I lied. Let's jump down here and do 22, and then I'll have you go back and do the rest of the notes. So on 22, a rectangle's area is x squared minus x minus 72. What are the possible dimensions of the rectangle? So remember, if it's area, we're talking about A equals length times width. So then really you're looking for two things that multiply to end up being your area. So essentially they're just asking you to factor in a very fancy way. I don't know if fancy is the right word, but it's just a different way of asking you to factor that trinomial. So again, we have our two parentheses here. Split x squared into x and x. Second sign tells us it's going to be different. If we do our x, we would have factors of negative 72. So they have to multiply to be negative 72 and add to be negative 1. So then we're going to use 8 and negative 9. And we forgot to fill our signs in here, plus and minus. So then we have plus 8 minus 9. There's your possible dimensions. So one side could be x plus 8, and the other side of that rectangle could be x minus 9. Now that we have that one done, I want you to go ahead and jump back up to 16 through 21. Hit pause on the video, and I want you to get the answers on your own, and then once you're done, hit play and see how you did. Okay, this is what you should have gotten for 16 to 21. You will notice that I did not draw any X's on these, so I also wanted to show you that there really is no work to show if you're really good at doing factors in your head and can think of what things add up to in your head. A lot of people like the visual, so I'm totally fine if you want to continue doing the X games, or even if you want to continue doing the tables from the front. There's really several ways that you can go about finding your factors, but whatever works the best for you. So once you're done checking your answers for 16 through 21, you are good to go, and that is it for your notes.